So Deion Sanders is completely revitalizing the roster in Boulder, and yet Vegas and the odds makers aren't buying into it just yet.
Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights-free and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, and when you enter promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. We can't talk about Colorado on the show without my man Kevin Borba. He is the host of Locked On Buffs. Kevin, 3.5 the win total for Colorado, tied for the lowest number, according to our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, in the Pac-12, tied with Stanford. Are the Buffs just being undervalued here in your view, or do you think that's about right?
I feel like the number is fair considering we don't know what they're going to look like. If I was a gambling man, which residing in California, I'm technically not. I personally would bet the over. I think they have winnable games. Just looking at their schedule, I know a lot of people are really excited about this TCU team. Don't know why they're 23.5-point favorites. That seems a little much, but Nebraska, I feel like, is winnable. Colorado State should be winnable. Arizona State, Stanford, even Arizona, maybe Washington State. So right there that I'm rattling off a few games. And so a few games that they could win. So I think realistically, 3.5 feels like the safe number. I don't think you want to put them at 6.5 because then everybody's going to start taking the under. I don't think you want to put them at 5.5, same thing, because I think 3.5 is the safest bet for the powers that be over at FanDuel. But realistically, the Buffs should win at least, I've been saying 5 to 6 games.
So with all the roster turnover that Coach Prime has introduced this offseason, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, go down the list of, 35 to 40 or 78, 100, I don't know, however many guys he's brought in over there. Like, it's a completely different team from what they were a season ago. Why do you think that the odds makers are looking at them and saying, yeah, we're going to put their win total at 3.5, which is about what it was a season ago, by the way?
Yeah, I think they're just like I said, it's kind of a safe thing to do. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe try to update it later on, the closer it gets to the season. I don't know if they're allowed to do that, but realistically, they're bringing in, and you have to consider this 1-11 roster last year was arguably one of the worst college football teams I've ever seen. They
up there.
They made Kansas look really good. Those Kansas teams from a few years ago, and so I feel like with all of these new players, they should at least be somewhat better. Look at those odds right there, right below Stanford. I cover both those programs, so based off the odds, I'm only going to see about 8 wins total, maybe 6 wins total. Not ideal for someone who I guess is looking to be entertained. But in terms of Colorado, like you said, they bring in so much more talent. I really don't know why the odds makers are doing them that dirty. I've had all the guests I've had on my show said that they think the over is very much in play. So I don't know what the odds makers know, but you always know that they have some insider info, I guess.
Yeah, Vegas knows, and those of you watching on YouTube can see the graphic that I've got up. This won't be the last time we refer to it this week or in the coming weeks on the show. So Colorado and Stanford with the lowest projected win totals or expected win totals, I guess I should say, at 3.5 wins. You've got Cal and Arizona at 4.5, Arizona State at 4.5, Washington State at 6.5, and then the 6 teams that are kind of seen as contenders at 8.5 and above here. So when I look at Colorado, I don't think that their 3.5 is being, set in the same light that Stanford's 3.5 is being set. And what I mean by that is Colorado's schedule is really, really hard. They do not have, there are not that many schools in the country. There are 2 Pac-12 schools that I can think of off the top of my head. And I think it's just 2, Colorado and Utah, ironically, the other mountain school out there, that have 2 Power 5 opponents on their non-conference schedule. And I'm with you that it's a big number week 1 against TCU at 23.5 points. I think that's indicative of how Vegas feels about the Buffs going into the season. It's going to be a fascinating game to watch regardless. But I think if you took Stanford's schedule and you gave it to Colorado, I think that win total would go most likely up to 4.5, because Stanford's non-conference is Notre Dame. Of course, they're always in there. And then they have Sacramento State and they have Hawaii, I believe, is the other team that they've got in there. I think if you gave that to Colorado, you'd see the win total probably at 4.5, where you have Arizona and Cal at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And I will be in Hawaii week 1 for Stanford, obviously for work reasons. Where work calls, I must go,
Duty calls. You
Yeah.
have to do what you have to do in this industry, Kevin. You really do.
I got to make the sacrifices. It's hard. I know.
Somebody has to.
I know. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I think if you gave them that schedule, they'd probably rattle off a few more wins. I think, honestly, and this is probably not the best thing to say about the odds makers and powers that be. Don't worry, I won't say anything crazy. I saw the eyes twitch a little. I just feel like it's an educated guess. I honestly, because nobody could really, we don't know the depth chart. We don't know what these guys are going to look like when they play together. We've never seen Deion Sanders behind this offensive line. They're projected to land the top running back in the transfer portal. They have some really good wide receivers. Defensively, they're getting a lot of bodies. I don't know if they're going to be good, but on offense, they should at least be able to keep up with other offenses. I think it'll be determined on defense, and that's what worries me and the rest of the Colorado fans that aren't predicting national championships. But the offense should be solid. So I think it's like an educated guess. It feels like the safe choice if at 3.5. I feel like
so. I'd push back on that, and I will, because I have never known odds makers and sports books of any kind to make an educated guess. Now they whiff.
Well, it has to be, though, because we've never seen this team play. I couldn't even give you a depth chart if I wanted to, because I don't know.
But they have an idea of the caliber of players who have been brought in, what they were dealing with before. Like, they didn't generate that number. I don't think if you went to any given, like, computers are obviously a huge part of this as well. And if you went to any odds maker in Las Vegas, I don't think they'd necessarily be able to give you a 2-deep on every single college football team in the country right off the top of their head. I think there are metrics that go into it. And look, Vegas does, and I'm sure there'll be people who are outraged at this 3.5 win total and such, being right there with Stanford, who I expect to be the worst team in the conference this year. If you look at that and say, well, how could you possibly know? I think with Colorado, you still have to have that level of almost anonymity, right? I think that's kind of what you're getting at. But what I'm getting at, Kevin, is that I don't think that Vegas goes out there and just guesses.
Well,
right?
I'm not saying they're like just winging it, but I feel like you don't want to go too high, because obviously Vegas is all about the odds makers are all about keeping their money and taking ours, right?
Correct.
But you don't want to put the odds at, you know what? Do they have the number 1 transfer portal class in the country? Yes. Do they have a lot of former 5 stars? Yes. Do they have a lot of talent coming in? Yes. Okay, let's put the odd total, or the win total, at 6.5, because that would make they'd have to win 7 games. And so I think most common bettors would probably take the under on that.
Everybody would hammer the under.
Exactly. And so I think they're trying to put it into a situation where obviously they want to make money. And right now, I think the easiest way to make money for them is kind of being a little safe.
When they set these numbers, they're trying to get 50% of the money on one side and 50% on the other, so that it's balanced. And then House Edge
70-30 though.
and House Edge gives them their payout there. But Vegas has made whiffs before. It's happened, right? I'm an NFL fan, and my team's the Seahawks. And last year, their over/under win total, I thought they'd be a 4 or 5 win team, maybe one of the worst in the NFL. They end up going 9-8. I think their win total in Vegas was 4.5, and they of course ended up winning 9 games. So it has been known to happen. But I don't want to
talk too much about Vegas. I just don't want Loan Sharks to be your pit boss Rich or someone to come up to my front door and like break my kneecaps or something.
Yeah, you don't want to get in the wrong situations there in Las Vegas. We're in the right one here talking about this, and Kevin and I are going to discuss what it would take for Colorado to go over, what it would take for Colorado to go under 3.5 wins and which one we kind of think is more likely there. And we'll dive into the schedule as well. But we need to dive into Birddogs as well, because there are these wonderfully comfortable, versatile shorts that you can just wear all summer long. You can wear them in the water. You can wear them just out and about. You could wear them on a sunny day on the golf course. Whatever you are looking for, Birddogs is going to give you that. Their stretchy fabric make your legs look great. They're really, really comfortable, and they're stylish too. So go get your next order. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. And again, you can wear these literally all summer long. If it's hot, if it's cooling down a bit, I don't know where you are summer wise, if it's cooling down a bit, but Birddogs has got everything that you need. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get that free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. All right, Kevin, so we touched on this, but I want to dive into the schedule here for Colorado and why I think their win total is lower. Because if you're talking about just total composite talent on 24/7, Colorado is greater than Stanford, right? Like, I don't think anybody's really questioning that.
Yep.
With the inability for the Cardinal to go into the portal and the way the recruiting's been the last couple of years, it's been okay, but it hasn't been stellar for sure. So the schedule for Colorado with the win total of 3.5, they go at TCU, Nebraska, and Colorado State each of the next 2 weeks. I don't think they win at TCU, even though, is 23.5 a lot of points. Yeah, is TCU, I thought they'd be kind of like a 7-8 win team. Vegas has got their over under at 7.5. So maybe I got a future setting lines. I don't know. I'm just, throwing it out there and whatnot.
Yeah.
Not bad from me there. But the Nebraska game is interesting because I think that's kind of be the most indicative factor as to whether Colorado could actually go over 3.5 wins. But then their conference schedule, it starts in about as brutal a fashion as possible. And you go at Oregon to Autzen Stadium for your first ever Pac-12 game with Deion Sanders at the helm. Then you host USC. At least you get the Trojans at home, but those are going to be two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference who have college football playoff aspirations this year. So I really think that beginning, when you look at it and say Nebraska with Matt Rule, who's a great college football coach from what we've seen so far, when that's your most winnable Power 5 game and you've got 4 of them in there, I think that's factoring into that 3.5 win total is they could get off to a really slow start.
Yeah, I think the hard part when you look at their schedule too is worst case scenario, they start the season like this is like epitome of worst case scenario. They start the season off 0-3. Like that's just the sky is falling in Boulder already. I think obviously.
Can you imagine what the media world would be like?
It's gonna be crazy either way. I talked about it on yesterday's episode on my show with CBS Sports' Shehan Jayaraja, and we were kind of like joking around. If Colorado beats TCU week 1, they're automatically going to be a top 25 team.
Yep.
The media is instantly going to be like all in on Colorado. And then obviously if they play Nebraska and beat them again, they're just going to continue to ascend up the ranks. And it's like, this is like the most like take a week by week team I've ever seen because they could go 0-3 and the sky could be falling and it could just be a tough experience diving into Oregon and then USC, or they could start off 3-0 and all the buzz is there and then they lose, let's say 2 straight. I think that Arizona State game is winnable despite how good they're getting. But yeah, the schedule doesn't really give them any breaks. They have, I would say the closest thing to a break is probably going at Arizona State, then against Stanford. But after that, the schedule's, again, not very friendly in terms of teams they have to host and then who they have to travel to. So tough way to start the Coach Prime era. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they deal with adversity. Is the buzz and is the swagger still there when they lose a couple straight?
24/7 Sports, by the way, ranked this schedule as the toughest in the Pac-12. So a bit of a rude introduction for Coach Prime at the helm in year 1. That's, the bad news. And I think the schedule is mostly bad news for the Buffs as we've been discussing. But, the good news, you do get to host Nebraska. Mm-hmm. You get to host Oregon State and you get to host USC. Those figure to be 3 good football teams. Nebraska probably the worst of the 3. I'll be honest, I'm not super in touch with Cornhuskers football, so I don't know what they've been doing in the portal and such.
7.5 point favorite, so that's going to be a close one.
7.5. So they're expecting that to be a much more competitive game. It's still a sizable number considering the game is being played in Boulder, but it's not exactly TCU at 23.5 points there. But I think the opportunity for Colorado to show something is after their first 2 conference games. Oregon, USC, probably going to be losses there. But then Arizona State, and Arizona State on the road, and then against Stanford, ASU's win total is 4.5. I'll put these back up on YouTube for a sec. So they're not expecting Oddsmakers very much of Arizona State. I'm not expecting that much of Arizona State. And then you play Stanford, who's probably, in my view, the worst team in the conference going into 2023. They just have a long rebuild road ahead of them for the Cal graduate Troy Taylor in there. Now, looking at the Buff schedule here, I think games that you could realistically, without it being a monumental upset, games that you could realistically see Colorado winning. Nebraska, Colorado State, Arizona State, Stanford, maybe, or I don't know.
Arizona. Arizona's at 4.5.
I'd put Arizona and then maybe one of Oregon State and Washington State, but I think those are good teams. I think Oregon State's a better team. You get them at home. Washington State, maybe not quite as good, but still going to, I think, be a solid team again this year. And you got to play them in Pullman. That's a tough environment to go into. So I think you've got 5 to 6 games that you describe as winnable. And that's why I'm with you that the 3.5 number is appropriate for Colorado, because if you're talking about 5 to 6 games where you can reasonably see them winning, you're probably not going to win all of them, right? Even if things are going according to plan, you're not going to go 6-0 against those. You're not going to beat one of Washington State and Oregon State and then go 5-0 in the other games that took place. But the other question I want to ask here, Kevin, is do you see any potential for a big upset on Colorado's schedule?
Yeah, I think honestly, and to go back to it, and I feel like it's just kind of sticking with me. Week 1, TCU. I think that's obviously going to be the biggest upset. Maybe the USC game might have like a greater line in terms of how much.
It's in Boulder though, but USC is going to be much better than TCU. That line's going to be over 20 for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing with TCU too, and I think people are like overlooking this aspect of or element of surprise. Colorado could literally go out there and just like surprise the hell out of them. This is what TCU is going to have to go through to study film. They're going to have to watch Kent State's offense. They're going to have to watch Jackson State's offense. Then they're going to have to tune into Alabama's defense. And then they're just going to have to hope and kind of pray that they know which individual players are in which roles and kind of plug and play them in their minds. And so I think it's going to be hard to prepare for this Colorado team week 1. Also, I don't have a lot of faith in Chandler Morris. I think he could prove me wrong, but the TCU quarterback, I don't think he's that guy per se, as the kids say. Also, another game I don't know if this is like the sexy upset, but at UCLA is a game that I look at as a potential upset.
That was the one that I was eyeballing because UCLA, look, they get more fans than people will give them credit for on social media at the Rose Bowl, but they're not packing the house. They're not the rowdiest in the conference and whatnot. They were beaten, by the way, by a rebuilding Arizona team as a 19.5 point favorite last year in the Rose Bowl. They've been beaten by Fresno State in that stadium as well. Like they are not a team that you look at. Like there are certain programs that you look at and say, okay, unless we're contending for a Pac-12 championship, we're not going to beat them on the road. We're probably not going to beat Washington on the road. We're not going to beat Utah on the road. We're not going to beat Oregon on the road. Not going to beat USC on the road. Probably not Oregon State either, who have lost just once in the last couple seasons at Reser Stadium. Just one time, and that was to USC, a game that they probably should have won. So I'm with you that UCLA is probably the biggest upset game, but I mean, a lot of these games would technically be upsets, but that would be like the big.
Going back to like the favorite, like their 3.5 win total, I think also the odds makers are kind of going off of they're going to be underdogs in probably all but 2 games, realistically. The Stanford game wouldn't shock me if they're favored, and then Colorado State. So the 3.5 win total, going back to that, also makes sense because they're going to be underdogs in 10 out of 12 games.
Yeah, they get Arizona at home too. I think that's a game that if you're going to go over 3.5, I think you probably have to have that one, and the Stanford game certainly as well. but I think you got to be able to win those games at home. And look, we saw what Coach Prime brought to Folsom Field for the spring game. Can only imagine what will happen once the season actually starts. So once the season actually starts, Kevin, what do you think has to happen for Colorado to go over 3.5 and win, say, 4 or 5 games? And look, if they were to get to 4 or 5 wins, I think you'd probably beat Nebraska, Arizona State and Stanford, and Arizona, along with Colorado State, and then, maybe drop one in there if it ends up being 4. That'd be my guess. But from a play, a style, a philosophy, whatever, execution standpoint, what has to happen for Colorado to go over 3.5?
Yeah, I think Deion Sanders really needs to kind of emerge as the quarterback that everyone in the locker room thinks he could be. I think obviously you're never going to shoot down your own player, but there's a lot of hype around Deion. His arm strength is probably up there with some of the best quarterbacks in the country. He tore up the FCS level, so if he could adjust quickly and not go through that growing pain stage that Cam Ward did last year, that'd be helpful. I think the offense, really, I'm confident in them outside the offensive line, which they have 13 scholarship offensive linemen now. It's just a matter of finding the right 5. So they got to build that connection. I think it's getting pressure on all these Pac-12 quarterbacks and all these quarterbacks on their schedule. Going through the schedule, Chandler Morris can run and he could throw. Jeff Sims at Nebraska could run and throw. Bo Nix, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks. Caleb Williams, same thing. Oregon State, DJ Uiagalelei is supposed to be pretty good for them. Jaden DeLora. And so the defense needs to get pressure on the quarterbacks. They can't be giving up big plays. And then also their offense is so fast. And I hope for their sake that they're fast and efficient, because if they're fast and inefficient, then when you're playing USC or whoever it may be, I guess in the span of 5 minutes, you could be down 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So last thing, Kevin, what is the worst case scenario for Colorado this year from a win total standpoint, and what is the best case scenario? This is a question that was sent in from somebody. We're going to be doing this for every team at some point in time here on the show when we go through their schedules and whatnot. But win total is 3.5. What do you think the floor is? My floor would be 2.
Yeah, I think I'm probably right there with you. I think if we're getting like horrible, like the sky is falling, worst case scenario, I think 1 is like
that. I don't know if I'd see that.
That's like beating Colorado State then losing out. But I think 2. I think they beat Stanford and Colorado State at a minimum. Which even then, that's an improvement. They won 1 game last year, so it is an improvement. Best case scenario, I got to go 7. That's the only number I'm comfortable going as high with.
Wow, that's big.
Okay, but that's like best case scenario. That's like they win the 5 games that we've been talking about, or 6 games, whatever it was, and then they upset somebody. Someone makes a crucial mistake, or God forbid, you never pray on someone to get injured, but maybe someone has injuries later down the line. Like Utah, for example. I'm not saying that they're going to have injuries, but Cam Rising's been banged up a couple times in the past couple of years. And so maybe they just happen to catch a team on a bad day. And so 7 is like the highest number I'm comfortable saying. If I had to project their win total right now, I'd probably go 5 or 6. That'd be like my prediction.
I would lean towards 4 and 5. I don't think they could get over 6 given the schedule. I'd feel okay saying 7 if you didn't have Nebraska and you instead put a Conference USA team in there, instead of the Cornhuskers.
It's like, what, we don't know if they're going to be good. Like, what if they're really good and all of a sudden they shock us? Or what if this like whole experiment fails and it's like, yeah, they'll be lucky to win 3 games. So I want to see them play. I want to see them even at fall camp. I'd like to see them play together, because I feel like they're going to be wearing "Hi, my name is whatever" until week 1, because there's so many new faces. Like, it's really hard to speculate on a team that we don't know about, and that's the hardest part, because all of the other Pac-12 teams, or probably every team in college football at least, have some sort of building block that you could go off of, something you could go off of. Colorado, it's like, this is a new team. They might as well have been dropped.
You have like an idea of who you have an idea with most other schools of like who's on the depth chart, right?
Yeah.
Like, who's going to be where? I mean, Colorado, Deion Sanders is the quarterback, and
you got Travis.
That's kind of it right now, right?
Yeah, there's probably like 4 people that I could confidently say are going to start, and that's so I'm missing 18 starters.
Yeah, or you have to still determine 18 starters. So I think we'll let that play out before we go with record predictions here. Yeah. But it's definitely a tough thing to try to judge. I think Colorado more than most schools, but it's an easy decision to always bring on my man Kevin Borba, Locked On Buffs, Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Kevin, thanks as always, man.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.